And we continue our coverage of Trump in crisis now as we focus on the other growing problem for this president, his likely impeachment. This after a key player in the Ukraine pressure campaign refused to show up for a deposition in Congress this morning under orders from the White House. Gordon Sondland, a big Trump donor who became our ambassador to the EU and who apparently served as a point person between Trump and the Rudy Giuliani-led efforts to pressure Ukraine for political dirt. The other impeachment headache for the president today? Well, Americans warming to the idea of impeaching him and of kicking him straight out of office. A new Washington Post poll shows nearly 6 in 10 Americans now support an impeachment inquiry. Only 38% of Americans oppose one. And on the broader question of removing the president from office, 49% say Trump ought to be convicted in the Senate and given the boot outright. That means more people now support removing President Trump, 49%, than the 44% who oppose it. And I just want to drill down a bit more on why Democrats are so anxious to speak with Ambassador Sondland and why they're so upset about the White House's decision to block his deposition today. Well, Sondland, he's featured in some troubling texts about Ukraine. In both, he's chatting with Bill Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, and in one text, Taylor directly asked Sondland, are we now saying that security assistance and White House meeting are conditioned on investigations? The precise action Democrats are investigating as we speak. Well, what was interesting was Sondland's cryptic response. Call me. Another exchange looks even more problematic. Taylor repeats his worries about withholding security assistance for Ukraine in exchange for help with a political campaign. Sondland waits 4.5 hours to respond, and he does so with language more precise than most press releases or legal opinions, specifically denying any quid pro quo of any kind. Turns out, Sondland, according to multiple sources today, called President Trump directly, in that interregnum before hitting send on the lawyer-like response. Democrats want to know what the conversation's contents were between the president and Sondland. And for more, we turn to former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. And Gene, it seems that there was some kind of conversation where Sondland clearly wanted to get not only clarity but also authority from the White House to do what he was doing. We never got those answers today because he never testified. What I'm trying to figure out, if you know the answer, Gene, is what can the Democrats actually compel in terms of documents they want to see and testimony they want to hear from this White House? Because it basically seems the White House says, we're going to put what we want on servers, we're going to shut down the people that we want to shut down, you'll talk to whom we want and see what we want when we want it.
Well, the first thing, Richard, and it's good to see you again, is to apply the law of privileges. You have the attorney-client privilege, the priest-penitent privilege, you have executive privilege. But all of those privileges wash away if you have a waiver and or a crime fraud exception. If you take the sanitized transcript of President Trump's call on July 25th and you take his confession and admissions, he committed possibly 3 crimes in that call. 1, an election crime because he's trying to get a foreign country to interfere in our election, a bribe or extortion, and possibly a 4th crime, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, because you have to remember this, Richard. The roughly $400 million that Trump held, the arms for dirt, that represented 10% of Ukraine's military budget. That was a big deal to the Ukrainians. Trump knew that. So going back to Sondland and Taylor, that 4.5 hours, the president cannot claim executive privilege because we have strong reason to believe that Trump may have either lied to Sondland or confessed further to Sondland that it was arms for dirt. So the punchline...
We're now in the rub because you got an audience listening to you and they're conflicted, saying, wait a minute, is this a legal proceeding or is this a political exercise? And by now the public knows the math. The House, and they already got the votes, if there's a simple majority by plurality of 1, they can vote for articles of impeachment, okay? And then it goes to the Senate. More complicated there, where you need 20 Republicans to vote with if every Democrat voted for impeachment. Yes, there'd be a trial, But at the end, this is going to be a political calculation by lawmakers. Should we approach this exercise in terms of access to the documents in a political way or through the prism, like you are, of an attorney as to what's privileged documents or not? Who's going to decide what we're going to see and who we're going to hear from?
I think it's a double-barrel shotgun. The House of Representatives, in an impeachment inquiry can look at non-criminal conduct to determine abuse of power. But I say it's a double-barrel shotgun because if you have criminal conduct of such a high degree, it's a fortiori an abuse of power. But they could just look at abuse of power, but we have both here.
At the end of the day, in terms of who shall decide and also the side that the law tends to fall on here, do you believe that there will be, in effect, testimony that will be compelled, that they're going to make sure that we're going to hear from Sondland, we're going to hear from both of the whistleblowers, and we'll hear from other folks that they want to have testify? And do you think we're going to actually see the contents of that information that apparently is on that secret server? Not just the conversation that apparently happened, the full transcript between the Ukrainian president and ours, but also possible conversations with Putin, the crown royal family there of the Saud. To my point, are we going to see all this or not?
I don't think we're going to see all this. We're going to see parts of it because I predict this. By Christmas time this year, the House of Representatives is going to vote articles of impeachment. We're going to have some of the testimony from the whistleblower who initially filed the complaint, from the several or multiple whistleblowers who are corroborating the first one, and we may see selected documents, but we're not going to see the full Monte because Donald Trump's going to hold back everything he possibly can, and in the Democrats' minds, that is a separate article of impeachment. So Donald Trump has essentially painted himself in a corner.
I know some people think, and they're probably right, we'll all bring whatever baggage we have after 3+ years of this administration to say, you know, either you love the guy, you hate the guy, whatever the case may be. But this is not a jump ball, Gene, in terms of what the founding fathers clearly identified as an article of impeachment, or a high crime and misdemeanor, excuse me, the idea of soliciting and bringing in a foreign country's involvement in our elections. This was, in their brilliance, these guys, the framers, identified this as a huge threat to our democracy, and they made a point of saying, you can't do it, you can't even come within the area code of doing it, exactly the actions he did, and has admitted to.
Absolutely. I don't want to get into the details of what got President Clinton in trouble. We all know what happened. I won't go through what happened with Nixon. What we are experiencing now is Nixon on steroids. And if you go back to the founding fathers, the discussion in 1787 and 88, when they were discussing the articles of the Constitution and the separation of powers, this is tailor-made for what they were afraid of. Arms for dirt. This is disgraceful.
But is it your gut that impeachment will be decided on stuff we already know? Or do you think we're going to learn a lot more about conversations to this point we don't know the contents of, or other actions, let's say, that do not shed a positive light on this administration?
They could go before the House of Representatives right now and have 2 or 3 articles of impeachment. In the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 2 months, Schiff et al. Are going to build a stronger case. And I predict this. You're going to have 1 or 2 more articles come out in the next couple weeks and months, because there's stuff out there that is even worse than we could imagine. And here's where you're going to find trouble. The events leading up to the July 25th call, mark my words, those prelude events are going to be worse than the prologue, the epilogue events. That's my prediction.
All right, Gene, we will check on the prediction and what will and won't happen in the next few weeks here. But as I say, every day, a new chapter. Gene Rossi, great job as always. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So today, the two big issues, Syria and obviously impeachment. We've taken a look at the geopolitics of Syria, and we've also taken a look at the legal aspect of impeachment. When we come back from the break, I'm going to head to my friend Rick Klein. He, the senior political person over at ABC, to get the politics, what's going on behind the scenes on Capitol Hill about both Syria and impeachment. That conversation straight ahead.